My question for you is, we were kind of hoping that, you know, that the SEC would give that would give Ripple clarity, and that Brad would have some sort of negotiated clearance to have an IPO, but that didn't happen. And in fact, it almost happens like it's the reverse. Like, the SEC is so hostile toward Ripple that now it sounded almost like Brad was saying they might consider going overseas, like to London or Dubai, for their IPO. So is that what you think might happen? And if that's the case, what would that mean for US investors?
Yeah, good question. So let's take the first part of that, right, which is what Brad said. I put myself in his shoes, and honestly, based on the specific circumstances, I don't know that I would have said anything different, right? Because the last thing you want to do at this particular point, this is game theory, right, is signal to the SEC that I need you for this next thing that I want to do for the company. I need you to approve my registration statement now. Why would you signal that when you're still short of a settlement, when no penalty has been determined yet? You're still negotiating all of that. The SEC's, trying to create this hammer on them, saying, we're going to appeal this to Kingdom Come, right? To put pressure on them. We're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court to challenge Judge Torres. So if you're faced with that, and you're thinking that you want to move them off of that block towards a settlement and the payment of a one-time fee, the last thing you want to do is create this other issue that basically looks like a dependency on them. And I think that's what that signaling is all about. We don't need to do an IPO right now, right? Meaning that's not even on the table, guys. That's not part of this negotiation. Don't make it part of this negotiation. Let's talk about the thing that's at hand, which is, let's settle, let's determine the fee that's fair, and let's move on. That's exactly what he wants, and that's what Ripple and their shareholders want, and that was the appropriate way to handle it if you were in Brad's shoes. So that's number one. Put that remark in the context of the larger negotiation that is still taking place. It's happening right now as we speak. I know it, right? The other thing is that, when you talk about, if you're an American company and you're thinking of going overseas, the real reason you do that is because you're
We lost you, Joe.
Are you there?
Hey guys.
Now you're back.
Sorry. My phone timed out. What I'm saying is that if you're a U.S. company like Ripple and you're thinking of going overseas, you're going to do that principally because your natural markets and your natural customers are mostly overseas and not in the States, and or the U.S. regulatory and tax environment has become so hostile that your shareholders are basically going to be better off by you being under some foreign regulatory jurisdiction and under some foreign tax regime, right? So you do that for natural reasons that have to do with your operations and your markets, and you do it maybe for regulatory and tax, right? Brad's not talking about moving the company, at least not yet, right? And it would take a lot. Why? Because at the end of the day, their business is about servicing banks in the global payments ecosystem. Well, the world's largest banks are here in the States. The largest currency flows happen through the currency of this country, of the US dollar, right? It's the most widely traded, currency on every other pair in the markets out there, right? Whether it's USD Euro, USD JPY, USD Yen, right? USD, everything. And if the renminbi were freely convertible, which it isn't, because the Chinese government has capital controls, the USD renminbi would be the most widely traded pair in the world. But it's always the USD, and until that changes, it makes the U.S. a central point. So it's very difficult from the standpoint of their core business, to simply pick up and leave, because their largest natural market is here in the States. During the period of the lawsuit, they couldn't do business here in the States, and so they had significant growth and market share expansion by getting customers overseas. But the truth of the matter is that you can get 100 foreign institutions and they won't add up to a single Bank of America. You can get, 50 institutions in Europe and they're not going to equal the scale of a JP Morgan Chase. This is where the big dogs are. So the business calculus is that it's going to be really tough to simply move the company. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you would more likely want to stand and fight and make sure that you have a beachhead in what is the largest natural market for your services, which is here in the States. So that leads to the second point, which is, okay, if you're still going to be a US company and not change into a Dubai company or a Japanese company, right? Do you want to list overseas? And then I go back again and think, well, what's the advantage of that? Is it that you can raise more capital overseas? No. I mean, look at the size of the U.S. equities market compared to those other places. The U.S. equities markets today, our biggest exchanges, have roughly 35 trillion in asset value. The next biggest market is Japan, the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Tokyo Stock Exchange is about 5.5 trillion. It's about 1/6. And that's the next one, and it goes down from there, right? You go to the Euronext market, it's about 4.5 trillion. And then you go to, I've left out the Chinese by there because for geopolitical reasons, that's not going to happen, right? We know that. So it's basically, if you don't do it in the States, you're going to go to Japan, and then your next choice after that is Europe, right? So now it's an even smaller market. You go to the London Stock Exchange, which is outside of the European mainland. That's about 3 trillion. I mean, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and nobody even comes close to the scale of the U.S. capital market. This is where you're going to get the best liquidity to support your stock and the best valuation. The largest institutional buyers are going to be here. It's a very difficult decision to simply pick up and move and go to a market that is so much smaller and so much less liquid, where you're not able to face the kind of, institutional buyers that you have here in the States.